Hi everyone, welcome to the Fine Line in Healthcare. I'm Lily.
And I'm Has.
In this podcast, we talk about medicine, law and ethics, how they overlap and interact with each other. We'll explore the real-life challenges and dilemmas faced by healthcare professionals, go through some medical dispute stories, and discuss how law and ethics are shaping medical practice in Malaysian healthcare system. This is our second episode and the first dialogue session. Maybe we will start by sharing a little bit about who we are and why we started this podcast. Has, you want to go first?
Thanks, Lily. So, a little bit about myself. So, I started working in Taiping General Hospital where I did my housemanship. Okay. Then after that, I spent about 4 years maybe in emergency medicine in the district hospital. It was so-called district, but not that district Okay. And then, but I was lucky enough to get a lot of great bosses and also colleagues who supported and also inspired me So despite what people say that MOH hospitals are quite toxic, but my experience is the opposite. Okay. Then thanks to that hospital deputy director, I got into medical legal work, and I was appointed as the head of unit there So that's where my interest in medical law and ethics really sparked and really started So while handling the cases, I also learned that mediation can be a very powerful tool to manage conflict. So I went for a formal training and became a trained mediator. Well, after that, I pursued my master in medical ethics and law. Then I continued working in the same government hospital, but I feel like I really need to learn more about legal. So I took up a part-time Bachelor of Legal Studies in more or less like LLB, just without the privilege. Okay, and then I completed it last year. So I also sat for the Diploma of Legal Medicine from UK. So now I've stepped into academia, but I'm still new. I'm still learning every day, and I'm currently doing a PhD in medicine. So focusing on capacity and also disability studies. How about you?
Wow, Has, that's very impressive. I know we know each other very well, but when you sum up like that, it's wow.
Yeah.
We have a few things that are in common. We are both trained mediators. In fact, we joined the first mediation training session, I think in 2020. I did my houseman in Sabah, Tawau. So after that, I was posted to Kota Kinabalu, Sabah, and I was a cardiology medical officer over there for almost 4 years. I decided to switch to medical legal, want to try other new things, and the time I transferred back to Klang Valley, I got in medical legal unit. At the same time, I pursued M study, Masters in Healthcare and Medical Law. I would like to get more about law, and I'm now pursuing my LLB, Bachelor in Law Study. Now I'm still figuring things out. Yeah.
Not bad Lily. You're so impressive.
Okay, so next, maybe we talk about why we want to start this podcast. I will share a bit why I want to start this podcast. I love listening to podcasts when I do my housework, cooking, or exercise. Some of them really make me think. I like how they talk about issues from different angles. I feel like they are raising voice for those groups that don't usually get heard, those minority groups. Then I thought, why we don't have this kind of channel for our medical profession, like especially when it comes to medical law and ethics or medical legal. It's sensitive, but we don't have this kind of channel. So most of the time when you see news about medical negligence, it's always from the patient side. But what about the doctors? What about the system behind all that? So I think maybe we can also have our own space to share these stories, not to point fingers, but just to have more honest and balanced conversation. That's the intention behind this podcast, and I hope it sparks some good thoughts among our audience. So what about you, Has? What were you thinking when I said to you, Has, let's do this podcast?
Well, honestly, when you first said, let's do a podcast, I said, do I have to do that? But okay, I didn't need much convincing because I always believe that conversations around medical law and ethics need to go beyond textbooks and court cases. We see and experience so much in our line of work, stories, dilemmas, decisions that rarely get shared in a reflective kind of open space. So for me, this podcast is a great venue to share ideas, that often stay behind closed doors lah. So it's not about having all the answers, but asking the right questions. And hopefully, what I really want is to spark interest in people lah, whether they are clinicians, students, or just anyone who's curious about how ethics and law play out in real life, and more than that, I hope it helps to increase awareness lah, because at the end of the day, better understanding leads to better conversations. When better conversations can lead to better systems.
Exactly.
So I'm excited to be doing this with you, so let's see where it takes us. But Lily, can you remind me again, why did we choose the name The Fine Line in Healthcare?
Oh wow. Do you remember we came out with a few options at the beginning? Do you remember what were there?
Recall again.
So I think, the reason behind is we wanted to highlight that in the medical world, things are not always black and white. So when doctors make decisions, there's so much that need to be considered. Clinical judgment, patients' expectations, ethics, and nowadays even legal risk. So it's not always straightforward. And there is always this green zone where ethics and law overlap and very often clash. Initially, we came up with a few other, like the boundaries, the fine line is one of that. And I actually thought of calling this podcast The Grey Zone. But guess what? Has say it sounded like 50 Shades of Grey. So in the end, we went with the fine line in healthcare.
Yeah, I remember that discussion. Well, I think we were tossing around a few names, right, and trying to find out what really captured what we wanted this podcast to be about. So when you mentioned the grey zone, I totally got the idea, but I cannot help but to think of something less clinical. So for me, the fine line in healthcare just felt right. So it reflects how healthcare professionals are always walking this delicate line, the kind of like invisible line, so between doing what's best for the patient but staying within the legal boundaries and making ethically sound decisions all in real time. So often under pressure. It's rarely a clear-cut thing. So I guess we wanted the title to reflect that, right? So this isn't a podcast about textbook answers again. It's about real experience, difficult decisions, and the grey areas, not the grey at the grey, in between. So the fine line, I think, really sums it up for me.
Next, what are the fine line moments in healthcare? I propose we do it in a Q&A way.
Sure, boleh.
Okay, let me ask you first. Just imagine this. A patient has been in ICU for weeks on maximum support and no signs of improvement. The team recommends palliative care, but the family insists. They say, we want the doctor to go all out for our mother, or it can also be in a softer way, macam begging, we are not ready for this moment, please save our mother, doctor. So in this situation, what would be your advice to the medical team? When do we stop and who gets to decide?
Wow. Well, that's such an important and emotional question.
Yes.
Honestly, one that many healthcare professionals will face at some point in their careers lah, kan? So when you're in that situation with a critically ill patient and a family, well, that's not ready to let go, it can feel incredibly heavy because you're torn between kind of like compassion, professional responsibility, and also your ethical duty. Well, what I can say is just that first, pause and acknowledge, you need to acknowledge that this isn't just a clinical decision. It's not just about black and white, it's also a human moment. So families aren't just making choices based on facts. Well, maybe doctors probably are, but families are not, they are reacting from their love, from their fear, grief, and often we forgot. Sometimes they often make choices based on their guilt as well, So empathy must come first, At the same time, we need to be clear about the limits of what medicine can do. Continuing aggressive treatment when there's no meaningful chance of recovery may not be kind. It could actually prolong suffering. Although people say, how can you just let go like that? But actually, it only prolongs suffering, and ethically we must weigh beneficence, which means that doing good, and non-maleficent, which means avoiding harm. So if treatment becomes futile, it's not ethically required, even though it might be emotionally hard to accept. So now in terms of who gets to decide, this is also an important question, because who gets to decide when to stop or when to continue? This is where ethics and law intersect. Legally, doctors are not obligated to provide futile treatments, but ethically, we still have a duty to communicate, to support, and to guide families through that difficult transition. So the goal is not confrontational, but is to share the understanding and responsibility. So this is why one of the things why medical ethics is a fascinating essential subject. It's not about memorizing principles, but this is one of the examples where learning how to navigate these grey areas in real life, it gives us a framework to think clearly, act compassionately, and make decisions that we can stand by. So coming back to the question again, when do we stop? I think you can say that we stop when continued treatment no longer helps the patient. And who decides? Ideally, it's a shared decision, but of course, it needs to be guided by clinical judgment, grounded in ethics, and communicated with honesty and also empathy.
There is not always a definite answer, so we always have to look at the case, the situation, medical background, social background. There's no one definite answer for everything, so we have to analyze every time when we face certain dilemma or situation.
True. Okay, Lily. So now it's my turn to ask you.
Alright.
Okay. When we say consent was taken, okay, but was it a really informed consent? Okay, so this happens so often in real life. So a patient signs the form, nods politely, and the procedure goes ahead. But later, they come back and they say they had no idea. Okay, there were non-surgical options. Okay, or they didn't know about all the surgical risks and things like that. So, what's your approach to address this, Lily?
It's a very common situation. It could be because when we advise, the patient didn't really get the information, didn't really digest it. The information never retained. But if the conflict goes to court, what the judge do, they will decide based on evidence. So what's the evidence? For us, it's very basic, our documentation.
Let's go back to the scenario again. I think many of us have seen this happen. The patient signs, nods politely, and everything seems fine. Until later when they say, I didn't know there were non-surgical options. Or, I didn't know about the risk. And I can understand why this happens. Because for us, explaining risks and procedures might feel routine, but for patients, it can be overwhelming. One of the approaches is to slow down and not treat consent as just a signature on a form, but as an ongoing conversation. We can ask the patient to repeat back to us what they have understood in their own words. That way, we can quickly see whether they've really grasped the options. Sometimes we can also use analogies like comparing surgery to fixing a car versus managing it with regular servicing, or even simple dropping. It does take a bit more time, especially in a busy clinic, but this small step may make a huge difference. It reassures the patient, and for us as doctors, it reduces the risk of those I didn't know situations coming back later.
Next question. What do we want to achieve from this podcast? I will share first.
Okay.
To be honest, I hope this podcast can reach more people. Why I say so, right? When I was working as a medical legal officer in a government hospital, our team used to come out with these monthly newsletters. We would cover medical legal topics, real issues we face on the ground, and we did that for almost a year. But later we found out that not many of our in-house doctors actually read them.
Yeah.
And even when we shared articles on our Bridge for Care LinkedIn page, the engagement wasn't great either.
True.
So I reflected on that and thought that maybe the written format just isn't the best way to spark discussion. So now I'm trying something different, experimenting with this podcast as a different medium. So how about you, Has? What do you want to achieve from this podcast?
Thanks for sharing that. I think true, because we did not get enough engagement from the from the post, right? So yeah, that's quite sad as well. But I can really relate to what you say. So for me, I think this podcast is a way to make conversations on medical ethics and law kind of like more accessible. So I always felt that these topics are incredibly relevant to daily clinical practice, but they often get kind of like treated like some niche academic subjects, really detached from real life, and I think that's not true at all, So what I hope with this podcast is to spark curiosity, because I want listeners, doctors, healthcare students, nurses, anyone, to realize that ethics and law are not just about avoiding lawsuits and not just about memorizing guidelines. They are about how we treat patients, how we make decisions under pressure, how we communicate, and also how we reflect on what's right and what's wrong, especially when there's no easy answer, like all the cases that we shared just now. So if this podcast can help even a few people feel more confident in navigating these gray zones, or at least make them pause and think a little deeper, that's already a win for me. So in short, I'm here to share, to learn of course, and hopefully to grow together with our listeners.
Now come to our last question. What's the one change you hope to see in healthcare moving forward, particularly in the area of medical law and ethics?
Okay, so simple lah. Just to wrap up this session, right? So I hope to see a culture where ethical reflection becomes part of everyday clinical practice. It's not just an afterthought, I want it to be considered as important in daily activities. That's it. Okay. So how about you, Lily? What do you want to see in medical legal development in the future?
Alright. There's always something that makes us feel sakit telinga, like a cringing moment. So my sakit telinga moment is when I hear someone say to junior colleague, document this is medical legal, or don't do that is medical legal. So it gives me a mixed feeling. On one hand, I'm glad there is some awareness about medical legal issues. That's a good thing. But at the same time, I hope we will reach a point where we document not out of fear, but because it's simply the right thing to do.
True.
As in part of good clinical practice, something that comes naturally. I also really hope to see medical mediation take root and prosper in Malaysia.
Hopefully,
Yeah, I hope that when dispute happens, patients know they have other options, not just filing a lawsuit. And maybe one day, patients will even start asking for mediation first. You think that's possible?
Are we still gonna be alive when that happens? Okay.
Yeah, that's the kind of shift I would really love to see.
All right.
So that's a bit of our story, why we started this podcast and what we hope to achieve with it. If you have listened all the way to this point, you probably know why we choose the name The Fine Line in Healthcare and not The Grey Zone. So through this podcast, we hope to spark more open conversations around medical legal issues and share our vision for how medical law and ethics can grow and evolve in our healthcare system.
Yeah, we love to hear your thoughts, okay? So feel free to leave a comment or share your feedback. And if there is a topic that you'd like us to explore in depth, just drop us a message or send us an email, okay? And don't forget to follow us for updates on future episodes.
Thanks for tuning in. See you on our next episode.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.